Hey y'all, welcome to my presentation for my final project for CSC 521. So this presentation is about the tool that I created, which is a stock company overview tool, which means that it basically fetches information about companies on the stock market and you can use it in the CLI form. Um, this tool can take input by reading a text file, or you can directly insert the stock tickers into the CLI, and the CLI will parse the stock tickers that you put in, and then it will fetch the data, and then it will return that data once it finds it into a CSV file. To fetch the data, this tool gets the data from an API provided by AlphaVantage, which is a trading platform. Um, it is a free API. You can only do 25 requests a day if you do use the free API key, which is something to note. But to get over that, I have created something around it using dummy data for the unit testing, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But basically, to start with that unit testing, there's a file called test_stock.info.py, and this is what I use to show the unit testing that my class that I built, my tool works. So in this file here, over here on the left hand of my screen, you see that we are going to use some mock data to mock a JSON response. So then that way we can, do the processing because of that limit of that 25 requests. So I have some dummy data here where I added in some companies and their names. Obviously, this was derived from actually like real data that I have pulled, but I couldn't keep pulling it to do it. But when you run this tool, it's basically going to test out two main functions of this class, which is one, to return a dictionary of the data that was fetched, and then write that data from the dictionary to a CSV file. Because when we're getting those API calls in a JSON, is a dictionary. So that's what we did here. So I'm going to run this file to show that it works. And if you look here in this terminal here, you can see running this unit test, to get company info, class passed, and the right CSV passed. So that's something that sorry about that. So that's something that is nice. But moving forward, we have two more Python files, which is how we actually consume the application. One is a stock_info Python, and this is the meat and potatoes of the application. This is where the class is built at. We have as an object up here. We have some private attributes as API key because we're trying to avoid API key output as much as we possibly can for security reasons. So that was my idea about that. The self tickers can be a string of one ticker or a list. And then we have something called a company cache here in this init file, which is the dictionary. And this is where we're going to store that information that we're fetching from that API so that we can read it, so that we can write it to a CSV file. We have a string class here, which is like representation. So that way, you can get a representation of what's in there. We have a length, determines the length of the stocks being researched. And then we have a helper file. It's a private function, almost like class, private function. And this is what's building the endpoint using the API key and the ticker. So just to make this as dynamic as possible, we just put this in the helper class, helper function. Then we have public methods. So we have add tickers, get company info, fetch all, and write CSV. Starting with add tickers, this is going to add the tickers into a list using a set. It's going to get rid of any duplicates in here. And then we're going to return a new length in integers. And then the get company info, what we're doing is this is actually what's going to fetch the data from the API. This was actually making the API call. It will return a dictionary, an empty dictionary, if it's error, and it will give some error messaging as well. We also included a try, an accept, and an else here to keep this running. Then we have a fetch all class, which will iterate through all the tickers inside that company cache dictionary, and it will return another dictionary, which will basically have the stock name and then the information that's associated with that stock. And then for the right CSV file, we're going to get headers all across the cash companies union, so that we don't have any repeats. We're just gonna have all the ones that we want in common. And then we're gonna return the number of data rows, and we're gonna build each row as a tuple in the CSV file. So that is the meat and potatoes of this class. Very simple. And then far as the main PY file, this is how you run the file. And here we're basically doing arg parser, which is going to parse the CLI commands that the user is doing, typing in. So we have a function here called read tickers file. So if you put in a file, we're going to have a function to handle the functionality for that. And then the run here is just going to parse the inputs that the user puts in when they run the script, and then it's going to determine how to go about it. We're going to run the file, or if we're going to just add the tickers to the list and then call the API. So without further ado, I'm going to run it. So I already ran the unit test. And now if you look to the right side of my screen in the terminal here, I'm cd in directory. I'm going to show you and cat out what's inside of the tickers text file so you can see what that format looks like. So you see it's just Apple, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, Google, Amazon. That is what's in it, just a list with each one on each new line. And then next what we're going to do is we're going to pass it in. So here I use Python 3 because that's how it's named in my system environment. Main PY, this is my API key. If you would like to use this API key, you can. It's free. It's included in the README docs. And then the files, the tickers text, what I just showed. So I'm going to run this. It's going to give us an output about, it was successfully fetched. So there's another output about it writing the rows to the CSV. And then also that representation of, the stock info and the tickers. And then we're going to see I have a stock report.csv, and just to see if it has content, we can see this is what it looks like here. And then let me open up my Finder, and I'll bring it up to the screen in a second to show you the output of what the CSV looks like. All right. And then this is what it looks like if you were opening it up in Mac numbers or Excel. You would get 200-day moving average, 50-day moving average, 52-week high, the address, basically pretty much all the public information about a stock. We also, because it's a trading platform, also has like the buy or sell, the analyst ratings, analyst target prices, EPS, PEs, all the good information you need if you were a person that was interested in trading like myself.